Hey guys, welcome back to another Craftsman's Corner video. I'm going to be going over some shop updates including storage, electric, lighting, a new sort of big tool I built that I talked about a long time ago, and I'm going to end the video talking about some business stuff, selling furniture, pricing it. I'm going to be repeating things that I've said in the past, but I wanted to say them again and maybe add a new spin on certain things because I've been getting questions about selling furniture and business related stuff. About that for kind of a while now, pretty much ever since I mentioned it way back that I'm building and selling furniture. I get a lot of people that are beginners kind of wanting to know different tips to help them out, either in pricing their furniture or just getting started actually making some of those early sales. So I'm going to touch on that in the end of the video. So let's jump right in and show some of the new stuff. First off, and I think most noticeable, is lighting. I have four lighting fixtures on the ceilings now. They are four 8-foot, 4-light T8 light fixtures. So this camera kind of auto dims down, but it is a whole lot of light. Of course, it looks like there's dark spots, but that's the camera. It's very bright down here and will be great for filming and just in general working in the shop. So there's 16 tube lights total, and I'm using the closet and laundry bulbs. And then to spin around, I've got them on a light switch. So I can control the lighting, turn the lights on. So when I'm working on that far side of the shop, I'll just switch those lights on and avoid running all the lights. But when I'm going back and forth, I just keep them on. It's really, each light fixture that holds 4 tubes only pulls less than 1 amp each. So there's only 4 amps when all the lights are on. So that's not much at all. The only other thing I have on the circuit with the lights is my dust collector, which is nice and handy because if I walk out of the shop and I forget to turn it off, it just gets turned off as I walk out the door. And yeah, so that's nice and convenient. So the other things to talk about are storage, and that has been something I've been neglecting for a while. First off, you can see above my radial arm saw area is this shelf. It's just screwed up into the joists for upstairs, and on that, as you can see, I just keep all of my tool boxes. The tools are in them, so what I do is when I need a tool like the track saw, I just grab it, yank the tool out, throw the box back up there, and get to work. And that makes sure that stuff's not in my way all the time. The other cool thing that I did with this rack is, with the shelf, is made a little rack up underneath that holds my 2 Festool rails for the track saw, and then holds things like my yardsticks, straight edges. I've got a 4-foot one and then an 8-foot one. So I've got a 10-foot rail, a 7-foot rail, an 8-foot ruler, and a 4-foot ruler. So that's really convenient to have those up and out of the way. And then on top of the shelf there was this little gap which came in really handy for slipping things like my squares. I've got my big drywall square that I use a lot, and then my aluminum framer square. So yeah, that's that. And then down below, down below that shelf I have my radial arm saw area, which has 2 DeWalt MBFs, and I'm going to do more of a shop tour later on. This is just sort of a quick update. And then down below I've got these different doors and drawers, and until now I had the whole cabinet set up, but I had the lower parts of these cabinets were just open, and so was this. I just hadn't had the actual drawers made yet. So the drawers are 32 inches deep, so they hold a ton of stuff, and they're pretty much full extension because they fit very tightly. I can go all the way till there's about 2 or 3 inches still back in there, so I can easily access everything. This one's got all my screws and other types of hardware in there. This one's got a bunch of sandpaper stuff. So they all will have different things. There's only 2 or 3 of them that have anything in them at the moment. And then down below I've got some little hinge doors. All this is made out of 3/4 inch plywood and then surfaced with masonite on the work surface. I did the shelves with shelf pins to where they're all adjustable, so I can sort of figure out how I want to store everything. Ended up going with little double doors to where they wouldn't take up so much space when they were open. and I went with little holes on both the doors and the drawers instead of pulls to where they wouldn't be sticking out, because I would end up hitting stuff on them and knocking them off and breaking them. But I did go with smaller holes to where I wouldn't end up with dust getting down in them as much. And everything, so everything basically is nice and flush, so I like that. So that pretty much completes that. I'll kind of pan down the bench where you get an idea. It's a lot of storage built in. Then the area right in front of the radial arm saws is just left open, and I slip things like my dust mask and ear protection and a square and pencils and tape measures, which is really convenient to have right at the saw. Here's a little thing on the electric. You can see where I've got my outlets run. So where the power is originating from is there's the box, that's a sub panel. The power comes up around on the wall over here. I have an outlet, but then it comes around down here. That's the first outlet for this side of the shop, which I plug like my sander in and the dust collector. And then as you come up, I have it just run across the wall. Several outlets to where you can use other tools on this bench, plug in the radial arm saws, and then that goes up, kind of up over the ceiling, because the bench right here, the end of the bench in the corner, this opens up and it's sort of like a chest, and I can store things in there that I don't use all the time. And then there are two outlets on that back wall, and I went ahead and finished that bench back there and surfaced it with masonite. And that bench has my drill press, miter saw, and my two sanders, a disc sander and a spindle sander. And I've got a couple orders going right now, so I've got apron boards. This is just a top sitting on top of my workbench now that I'm putting the finish on. And then that is a project that I'm working on. This chair is a particular chair that I really like. Let me see if I can get close to it. It was given to me when I was helping out to the store that I sell my furniture at. I just liked the chair and they told me to take it, and it's ended up being one of my favorite chairs that I've ever seen as far as this sort of simple ladder back chairs go. So I'm going to use this as sort of, I think, my inspiration and model to come up with my own chair design. It will be similar to this one. I like it a lot to offer my customers for my tables. I get asked a lot about chairs and seating. I do make benches, and I've stayed away from chairs just because I haven't wanted to fool with them yet as far as selling them. But I think I might start offering that chair. If not, I'd still like to kind of make some based off of it. But there is two outlets on that back wall for those tools, so got sidetracked with the chair. The other thing is this little bench right here. It is just a simple little 2x4 bench that's sort of built on top of that blocky thing that runs around my basement that you may have seen in other videos. You can see it right there. And then this entire bench is built around it. So this bench basically goes up, across and down around sort of a reinforced part in the foundation. I think what happened is they originally, this was more of a crawl space, and in the basement was dug out, the foundation reinforced, and then a slab poured. So I built this bench right on top of the little concrete block area on this side. And all this bench is mainly for is for sort of whatever project I'm working on at the moment, to store those pieces or set tools over to where I'm not setting tools on top of my radial arm saw bench and on top of my actual woodworker's bench. Right above that is my air filter. Put a little roll of paper here where I can pull that off for when I'm painting stuff on the bench, or just more if I need to protect something, whatever you need paper for. The top of it is just a piece of melamine left over from making some concrete countertops, so that is really handy for gluing stuff up on. You won't have the glue stick to it, you can just scrape it off easy. So before, this whole space was pretty much unusable because I had just junk piled up on this wall, and I couldn't even go on this side of my workbench. So now with this bench here, it kind of organizes things just a little bit. I've got the other side of the shop where I kind of keep all my supplies way more organized, so the whole shop is working better because of that. So that's pretty much it for this side of the shop. The only other thing to note really quick would be I have electric run to the top of that. You can see it's all surface wiring. So there's an outlet here, and then wiring goes around, and there's an outlet down here behind the table saw for the table saw to plug into, and then that runs up and connects into a junction box on the other side of that wall. And then on this side of, on the wall right here, I put a little quick, simple rack I made on the bandsaw for holding my blades. When I'm using the table saw, I turn it this way, and then I mounted the blade guard, which I use occasionally, crosscut sled, and the dado blade. And I'm trying to glaze over this as fast as I can because I want to do a more total shop tour video later on, but I thought I would show a little bit of some of the things I've been working on. Yeah. So it's made my shop much more functional and really sped up production of certain things that I make, especially these farm tables. The process on that, probably shouldn't get into this, but I plane the boards for the top. I bring them around to this side of the shop, lay my piece of foam on top of the bench here, grab the radial arm saw, the track saw from up on the shelf, the rails here. I joint all those boards, and then I assemble all the bases here. Most of the time I have table legs already turned and stored under this workbench where I do my mortising over in the other room. And then usually I always have some aprons kind of in the process of being worked on to where I can grab those. So it's not always a starting from zero when I make these projects. Once you if you do end up making work that is similar or basically the same model again and again, you can pre-make parts. Whereas if you're doing custom orders totally from scratch every time, where it's a totally new piece of furniture, you're not going to be able to kind of pre-make parts. So that really does slow things down when you're sort of having to reinvent the wheel every time. I can turn however many of these table legs as I want and just have them on standby ready with the mortises already done. And then, so that's really good because you might have, like, say, a couple weeks where somebody doesn't order something, so I can still keep working, and then all of a sudden I'll get 5 orders in 1 week, and I've already got all the parts made. All I need to do is grab the right-sized apron boards, assemble the bases, and cut my boards for the tops already down that have already been jointed to the length and glue up the top to whatever width. So that really does speed things up. I'm going to touch on that more in the end of this video when I talk a little bit about pricing and sort of what types of items to make. So I'm going to stop talking about that now and show you on this side. There's 2 things to show over here. One is, let me get the camera set up real quick. One is the storage. So this is over where my metal lathe's at. Y'all are familiar with this side. Here's a new tool I got. I'll talk more on that. I'm going to do a review on it actually. I got that for my birthday. It is a Ryobi battery-powered chainsaw, and that thing is super cool. I have some really neat projects coming up that I specifically wanted a battery-powered saw for, and that is one of the lesser expensive ones, but it seems very capable. But underneath the sort of metalworking and engraving bench on this side of my shop, I'd really been needing some sort of storage because I have a lot of smaller items when you're doing the metalworking, all kinds of different tools and materials. So I made these 3/4-inch plywood cabinets, and then used, I had this like platform built for when I made concrete countertops in my kitchen out of 2x6s. So I resawed all the 2x6s because I had quite a few of them to make this really flat platform. Resawed them on my new bandsaw, and then planed them and finger jointed them all together, and then used the same jig from my kitchen island to do the little pulls, and made these simple cabinets. And so there's 10 of them total, and they're easy to pull out. So if I want to take one of the drawers to any part of my shop, I can yank that drawer out and go use whatever its contents are in a different area. And then there's a space for my legs here. I've got electric run on this side, my Fordham tool hanging up. Did a lot of outlets over here. It kind of went crazy. So I haven't worked on any projects since I finished it up over here, but I'm looking forward to doing it soon. I've just done all of this work that I'm talking about sort of in the past few weeks. And now for a, I think, very exciting addition to my shop, which I talked about briefly. Let me get this, there we go. I talked about briefly in the past as just the idea of making it is my clamping rack, and I don't have a table in it right now. I just yanked that table you saw on the other side of the shop out of it a little while ago, squared it up, and got a finish put on it. But basically all I do with this is once I have all my boards jointed and the biscuit joints cut in them, which are just to align the tabletop to where the boards don't shift all around on the glue. I come over here, and the way that this is designed, as you can see, it's 8 feet long. It's all made out of 2x4s and just one little strip of OSB and a 2x6 and some plywood. So just basically some 2x4s and then some scrap wood. It's designed to clamp up a top 8 feet long and 4 feet wide. But if I want to clamp up something longer, I can pull the whole rack out and then let the ends of the board stick out and throw some pipe clamps on that. So I'm not limited to 8 feet long in length, but I am limited to 4 feet in width, which I've never made a tabletop over 4 feet wide. 4 feet has been the biggest I've had requested, but I've got pipe clamps that are really long and that I could glue up on the other side of the shop if that did happen. But in short, I'm going to do a longer video on this, but in short, that platform you see down at the bottom, that's adjustable. I've got T-nuts. There's holes drilled through this, and this. So the two end pieces and the middle piece, there's holes drilled, T-nuts on the back side, and then I've got this bolted. The 2x6 is what keeps it rigid. The 2x4 on top of that is a platform, and then there's little supports under that to keep it square. So I just start to stack my boards. I put glue on the edge, put my biscuits in, set the next board on, and just repeat all the way up with that bottom piece adjusted to the right hole for whatever size width table I'm making. I hope all this doesn't sound too jumbled. But the other cool thing is about the design is that the distance that each one of these little screw clamps, and I got all these screw clamps, Jorgensen makes them, but I bought them all through B&H Photo. I'm going to talk all about this stuff later, but the cheapest place to buy them, strangely enough, was B&H Photo, which sells photography and video equipment, but it's a drop-shipped item from Jorgensen. So I don't know why they sell them, but they do. And the funny thing is that was the cheapest place. But this whole thing is made to where I can clamp up tabletops with 1-inch thick boards, but I can also clamp up things like kitchen islands with 2- and 3-inch boards. And I did that by making sure I had enough space here to where if I say wanted to glue up a 3-inch thick top, the pad of the clamp would be centered. But when I want to do like a 1-inch top, what I need to do is I just take a spacer, whatever size spacer for whatever size thickness top, and I just set those in front of the 2x4s. So then that spaces out the slab that you're gluing up to be centered with the pads. And then each one of these is a foot wide, a foot apart, and the different tables that I make are in 1-foot increments. So all I do is when I clamp up, say, a 6-foot tabletop, that end of that table, end of all those boards will come right to this 2x4, and I just stick an Irwin clamp about here and here, and then it keeps the whole piece from flipping out. So I guess you could put some sort of, that would be taking the place of like a call strip when you put a call strip on something at C-A-U-L, that keeps something from like bowing up and all the boards from flopping apart when you're gluing something up. So I'm getting a little wordy, but I just wanted to show the rack to you. This has really been nice because normally what I do is I'll make my table bases on the other side of the shop, and then once the table base is done, then I'll make the top of that table on top of the base. But throughout that whole process, I've got pipe clamps sticking out really far, and I'm crawling under the table to get to the other side of the shop. Then it has to sit there for 8 hours or so. I usually would try to glue them up at nighttime to where I could leave the shop as soon as I got it glued up. But now I have nothing in my way when I'm clamping something up. It's done so vertically on this side of the shop. And once I'm done, I just go back over to the other side of the shop and keep working. There's going to be other changes to this whole rack, and one of them is I want to put it on casters, and then in that way what I can do is after I glue up a top, I can roll the whole thing out and then just slip the whole tabletop behind it and glue up the next top. So I could store probably 6, 7, or 8 tabletops behind, or sort of in the rack behind it, and then that would also just add additional weight to it to keep it from tipping over, which I don't think it's really going to tip over. It's pretty stable where it sits. So the video's already gotten pretty long, but I'll continue on with what I said I would do, and that is talking a little bit on selling things. Of course, I've already probably said this exact same stuff, but I just want to repeat that for new people and the people who have been asking questions here lately. I've been getting a lot of questions. And one of the biggest reasons I
Usually people include kind of like what they are doing, and what they kind of want to move into doing. And a lot of people who are asking these questions are either kind of new-ish to woodworking, or totally new to selling, or have been dabbling in it for a little while, but really haven't had it work out so far. So I'm going to just go through a couple tips, and then I'm going to, in the future, and I know I've already promised this in the past, but I'm going to start making some sort of dedicated videos eventually. But I want to make sure that I've got enough information from you guys as far as what you want to hear about, and just have it put together. I don't want to put out any information that I later regret, or that isn't really all that useful. I don't want it to just be fluff. So I've got little notes here I'm going to look at while I'm talking. First of all, one of the biggest questions I get, even though I don't think this is really the important question, but people ask it when they really need to consider other things, is they just ask me, how much do you sell your tables for? And what they're really wanting to know is how much can they sell their tables for. But that's like asking someone anything. That's like somebody who wants to make jewelry and walking into a jewelry store and saying, how much do you sell your jewelry for? That almost has nothing to do with it, what one person does with what you do. Of course, you can use it as a vague reference, but you can have two people that make the exact same thing, and one guy not be able to sell his at all, and the other guy be able to sell it for a huge amount of money. So things matter of who you are, what you're making, your reputation, all that kind of stuff. It really makes a difference. So you can't get too hung up on what someone else's prices are, and you need to look at your product and your location. That's my advice. Your product is going to kind of give you a baseline, because you can compare that to other things, whether online or there locally. You can see what things are sold for. And that sort of location also is, you need to consider your area. If you live in the middle of nowhere in some town that used to exist 50 years ago because of some industry, but it's still there, but just not booming like it once was, or just out in the middle of the country, wherever, you might not be able to sell your stuff for as much as somebody living in the middle of New York City, or another big city, or just in an area where there's just more money in general, and demand. That's the other thing too, is it might not always be that there's huge money in an area, but if you live in a city that's got 5,000 people versus a city that's got 5 million people, you're going to have a lot more people that will just happen to like your stuff and happen to have enough money to buy it. So that's one thing you're going to have to think about. I live in what I call an average place, so my prices are sort of average, but oftentimes more expensive than sort of the store-bought version of what you would buy, but I'm making them one at a time myself. So that's something to kind of think about. And sort of maybe what I should have talked about first is even what to make to start with. I'm making mainly farm tables, and then other orders kind of spin off from that on occasion. But for the most part, I'd rather stick to my farm tables as far as the items that I make to sell, because that makes me able to specialize in it, become very efficient in making that. So you need to kind of pick something smart to make. I don't think that just saying I can make anything is a good thing to do, for a lot of different reasons. For one, you'll get too hung up on each individual order that you'll get from a customer, and each customer is going to make up a very, very detailed image in their head of what they expect it to look like. And no matter how much you and them are in agreement before it's made, you might not be on total agreement after it's done. And so a lot of times you can be setting yourself up for kind of just a tough customer, and you don't want that. So design your business before you even get started to just flow smoothly. So I think what that is just you need to find something that has a really good look, unique, that speaks to the people in your area, which you can find out by seeing what's for sale in stores, or looking at local home-related magazines, and sort of see what's trendy, or whatever you want to say, in your area, and then make some of that type of stuff. What you sell doesn't have to be exactly what you would want to make if you weren't selling it. Some people, that can go both ways. Some people say just do exactly what you want, and eventually your market will be formed, but you might be going quite a while. you might have to have another job while you're doing that, basically. You might have to have another job with this even if it's working perfectly. If you think you're going to get into being your average woodworker selling stuff and make a ton of money, you're most likely going to be wrong. Of course, you're going to get your Michael Jordans of woodworking on occasion that kind of get into this kind of high-end art furniture level of where you really are making a lot of money off of it, but that's most likely not going to happen for everyone. It won't happen for everyone. It doesn't happen for, that's not the case for me either. Just here locally, I have a small name for myself with building and selling my furniture, but for the most part, and I don't want people to think this is a negative thing, but people buying your stuff don't so much care about who you are and what you're doing. They just like the thing that you're making. So you really need to focus on coming up with a good product that you can take excellent pictures of, because the pictures are what's going to sell your stuff. You need to, well, I'm getting a little overkill on that. In a later video I'll go more into the specifics, but basically I think what you want to avoid is when you go into some store, and forgive the little reenactment that I'm going to do, and you walk in, you see some kind of a quilt stand or something, you go, I could make that, and it's for sale there for $25, and why would you want to do that? You're making something, I know it sounds mean maybe to somebody who wants to make something like that, but what you're going to end up doing is you just make something that's too normal looking, too common, not exciting, probably won't even get noticed if you have it in a store. It'll just blend in with everything else. You need to come up with something that does stand out. And then, that's another sort of a spinoff, is you don't always have to sell your item exactly amidst other stuff that's just like your item. Say you want to sell something, some furniture that's a little more modern looking. Well, if you can contrast that amongst some antique furniture somewhere, you know, not every single person that comes in there looking for antique furniture might want your modern looking furniture, but it's going to stand out. And the same goes for other things too. And it's not always furniture too. Say you get your furniture, there's like a small jewelry store in your area that sells nice sort of handmade type jewelry. And they've got some semi-boring looking tables in there with their jewelry on display. You could go in there and say, how would you like to display your jewelry on one of my tables? And have your table for sale right in the store. And then what you can do is you can take orders off that table. That table could either not be for sale and just there for orders, or you could sell that table and that table would be sold. You bring them another one, and when you bring them another one, you switch out the products on top of it. So you do have to kind of think outside of the box a little bit as far as where you might end up selling your stuff. But the biggest thing is you need to come up with something, and I hate this word, but you need to come up with something that's sort of unique or unique-ish, or just kind of has a special look to it. And you need to also, though, make sure that it's not something that's going to just kill all your time. Like with my farm tables, basically I'm just getting credit for really nice looking wood to start with. All I do is plane it, sand it, and smear some finish on it, and then I get credit for how good it looks. And when I say how good it looks, that's just an opinion too, but I mean, people are buying my stuff. Would I continuously make farm tables if I wasn't selling them? No, I'd make something different. But I can look at this and tell for the sort of area that it looks good. Same goes for the basis and everything too. So that's what you kind of want to do, is you kind of want to exploit what you're making, not have to have maybe, I'm getting too opinionated now, but if you can exploit the materials you have, you should do it. Basically, this rough sawn lumber, and it's aged, and you don't want to fight your materials. You don't want to go and do anything stupid like this stuff has a nice rough sawn texture. Don't plane it all away. Don't put an ugly stain over top the nice color that the wood already has. A lot of people get kind of hung up in the traditions of stuff like woodworking. Woodworking is something that has some really strong traditions in it, and sometimes that kind of impedes people's progress because you come into things only knowing the rules that people tell you, when in reality there are no real rules. You can kind of make of it what you want. So you can do a lot of experimenting, and that'll help too. You know, don't always think, you know, oh, I need to experiment, so I'm going to make an entire table. You can just take a couple different pieces of wood and try some different things on smaller scales. So yeah, that's that. The last thing is is where to sell things. That's one of the biggest things, and I recently got a question from a fella that said he's been trying to sell stuff for a while, but it's basically not working out at all. And I'm not naming names, so if you're watching this, I don't mean any of it personally. But like, and I already responded to him, but some of his items were much more kind of, like I said, normal looking, and I think blended in with some of the other things that people have available to them. And then the other thing he told me, and this is not just this fella, but other people have in the past too, is that they're selling their stuff trying to sell it on Craigslist. And I've sold a lot of stuff on Craigslist in the past. That's how I got started selling furniture, but it was all furniture. It was beds made out of 2x4s. So it's right up Craigslist alley. It's just some fast, cheap stuff that I was making years ago when I got started. It was shortly after Craigslist started, but that really worked out good, and that allowed me to buy all my early tools and kept me motivated to sort of move on in making and selling furniture. But yeah, I think Craigslist is kind of it almost looks like you kind of, I don't know, I want to say it cheapens it, but it kind of cheapens it a little bit. People are on Craigslist looking for deals. They're not there hunting down fine furniture. I mean, there's some nice stuff on Craigslist. I've bought a lot of stuff on Craigslist too. But yeah, I think selling things on Craigslist, maybe where you get started, it's not where you want to kind of stay. You need to try to get your items up into some stores and try to arrange the best deal you can with those stores as far as the percentages that you get and what the store gets. And then also, you need to get it into a store where the items will actually sell. Just getting a store to say yes can be... I have a place that I put stuff into, and nothing ever sold out of it, but it was just it wasn't the right store to sell out of. And then you'll find another store where it does great, and it's all about where it is and who comes in there. So all these answers, and I know I get asked very specific questions sometimes, but I'm not able to give you always the exact answers because I don't know where you live, and even if I did, I'm not familiar with that location. But my advice is to maybe stay away from Craigslist once you kind of get a little something rolling, and consider maybe doing some advertising locally. Not trying to sell, like on Craigslist you're selling locally, but you can do some local ads. Make a really nice ad with a really nice photo, and you got to be very critical. Look on the internet or in magazines and look at those photos with that perfect lighting where you can almost imagine, yourself in that environment. That's what you need to create. The actual photograph of your specific piece of furniture that you've made isn't always the most important thing. It's the overall feel that the ad gives you. So you need a perfect picture that can almost make someone imagine themselves in that environment where they want every last thing in the photo, including your table. My most successful ad and photo that I also use online is a picture of a table, and it's chairs around it that were just the customer's chairs that they had already bought, and the artwork and the candlesticks and all that, and a little chandelier. And I get people asking me where each and every one of those things came from because they want them, even though that had nothing to do with me. I just made the table. So, but it was just the photograph has been very effective and is responsible for most of my table sales. So your photos really are important, and that's another reason that I say that I think it's an advantage in specializing in something. Because if you do totally custom orders, and say you get one person that says, can you make me a birdhouse, and you make a birdhouse, and then you get another person that says, can you make me a bench, you make a bench, another person says, make me a table, you make the table, you end up with just a huge variety of pictures that any one picture can't sort of illustrate what you do as a whole. You just end up with a bunch of random pictures, which is fine, I guess, if that's what you want to focus on. But this is just the way I'm doing things. When I make one of these tables, I can take a picture of that table, and that table represents my entire business. So I never have any wasted effort, because otherwise all you did is you did that work just to get that money, and it ends there. As soon as you make that money, that job ends. Whereas when I make one of these tables, it continues to make me money, sort of, just as a photograph, as an advertising tool. When someone asks me a question, I've got a library of photos that are all very consistent. I can email them and say, this is what the wood would look like, or it helps in the whole process. So I think that's about it. I think I touched on the pricing. The last thing I'll say real quick, because I don't want to not say this, because this has something to do with, a lot of people will start out trying to sell their stuff for super duper cheap, and they'll make kind of a normal looking item and sell it for super cheap. And I think that that can kind of help you, can kind of hurt you, selling things for too cheap, because then the contrast of where you start to where you're going to need to go as you start to learn more about how you're going to have to price things, and especially if you start to rely on the woodworking. A lot of people have jobs and then on the weekend want to be woodworkers and sell their stuff, but they have that cushion of their job, so they price their things so low, and I think what it does is it almost devalues the work. People look at it and psychologically they'll be like, oh, it's only a $50 table, and I know that sounds weird, but I've heard a lot of people's experience that makes me believe that if you do keep things priced, I'm not going to say high, but on the higher of normal at least, I think that that can be better. It shows that there's a value in what you're making. And I've said this in past videos too, I don't think as far as financially goes, if you want your market to be the people who are just going to buy inexpensive items, you want to start having all of your efforts be something that snowballs into catering to customers who have the ability to pay for more expensive items. Because if you really do look at this realistically, you can very quickly realize that unless you're making as much money as you can possibly make for the item you're making, you might as well get a job at McDonald's or something. And there's nothing wrong with working at McDonald's, but I'm just saying you can kind of think that you're doing better than you are very easily if you don't look at it realistically of, wow, it took me all this effort just to get the lumber, and I bought all these tools, and there's electricity being used, and I get no benefits from this, and it's all on you. Everything that a company would normally take care of for you, down to handing you your check in an envelope, you're doing all that yourself now, and if what happens if someone doesn't order your stuff for a while? At your job, when you work at some company, when orders slow down, they keep paying you. But when you work for yourself, if orders slow down, that's all on you. So you do need to price things realistically if you want to get into it more on a professional level. If it is a hobby, you can do whatever you want. Even if you're kind of selling things and that's sort of part of your hobby. But see, I've been talking now for 18 minutes. This is like an epic video. I might have to edit this up a little bit. But that was a whole lot of talking, and I got more specific on that last part than I was planning. But if you do want to know anything else, just be sure to ask me in the comments below. Like I mentioned, probably in this video and in previous videos, I don't give out the personal stuff about my things as far as how I price things or my website address and all that. I like to keep that stuff kind of separate, just to where I feel like I can speak freely on this and not tie things together. I'm not looking to sell to anybody here on YouTube or try to convince somebody to buy my tables, so I just don't affiliate any of that stuff on there other than the information that I've learned. But if you do want some help, I will help you in the best way I can, specific to your situation. So send me questions or leave comments below if you'd like to have me take a swing at whatever you're figuring out. But thank you for watching the video. I hope it wasn't too long, even for those of you who say you like the long videos. This one really will test your willpower. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in future videos. Well, I imagine if you are still watching this video, you're already one of my subscribers, but if you're not, click the red button on the screen now and you will get updates when I post all future videos. Thanks again for watching such an incredibly long video.